If you're a beginner in watercolour and you just want to start from the very beginning, you've come to the right video because I'm a watercolour artist and I'm going to show you some simple steps on how to paint in watercolour. We're going to cover the basics, so we're going to go through some basic techniques that you need to know. I'm also going to be talking through the basic supplies that you need as well. So I'm going to be showing you my favourite art supplies that I use. If you want to learn more about watercolours or you just need to better your techniques and learn more, then subscribe to my channel. I do things like follow along with me tutorials, so I do real-time videos. I also do things like tips and hacks and learning videos as well. If you hit the red subscribe button, that means you won't miss any future videos from me. And if you press the little bell icon as well, that means you'll get notified every time I post a new video. Also, give me a like, it helps my channel to grow. I'm quite a small channel, so I need all the help I can get, and I really do appreciate your support. Let's get stuck straight into this video, and I hope you enjoy it. You'll need watercolour paper, and my favourite watercolour paper to use at the moment is by Arches. It is 100% cotton. I do recommend using 100% cotton, but if you can't afford that, there are plenty of other brands on the market that are more affordable, and I actually started painting with these and they work perfectly well. I would recommend that you get at least £140. Your paper needs to be heavy enough to pop the water down onto the page, and I mainly use cold press. I have used hot press before, but it's not my favourite. I use Winsor & Newton and Cotman watercolours. I have got this 45 pan set that I got from Amazon. It's got a range of the main colours that you could use to mix new colours as well. So it's got some really good primaries in here. So I do love this set. I also love the fact that it's got a mixing palette attached to it as well. So yeah, I'll link that. I also use this set that I got from Amazon. I originally bought this because it's got neons and also metallics in this, and I would definitely recommend it. It's got some gorgeous vibrant colours within this, and you don't really need to pick up a lot of paint to get the colours out. You also need some mixing palettes. I will link some of my favourite ones down below for you. Then you'll need a range of brushes, and I do use round brushes the most. So I will link my favourite brands down below for you, but one brand that I started with and I love are by Winsor & Newton, and I love these because they're really good quality. They're synthetic, so they've got some really good snap to it, but my favourite brushes are by Silver Black Velvet. Then you'll need a pencil and an eraser, and I do use a range of soft lead pencils with hard lead pencils. I use the soft lead pencils to transfer my designs, and I'll use a hard lead pencil for adding my design down onto my paper because they erase really well. You'll also need a jar of clean water. Let's make that 2 jars of water, and the reason for this is because I use the first jar of water to really rinse my brush off and get most of the paint off my brush, and then I'll use the second jar for either giving my brush an extra rinse to make sure that I'm not contaminating my paint with the dirty water. I also use the second jar to add clean water down to my paper. You'll also need some masking tape to tape down your design to keep your paper nice and flat and also give yourself a border. You'll need a paper towel, or I just use cloths, for blotting off your brushes so that your brushes are not completely soaking wet when you apply your paint to the page, because that's just going to create puddles on your paper. The first technique I'm going to show you is the wet on wet method. So I'm applying some even and clean water onto my paper. Then I'm going to drop my paint in, and you can see exactly what's happening here. The wet paint is dispersing within the water and spreading outwards. So it all depends on how wet your paper is to how far that paint will spread. And the wet on wet method is one of my favourite methods to use. The next method I'm going to show you is blending colours in a wet on wet method. So blending different colours together. I'm going to apply some permanent rose here, and then I'm going to apply some magenta right next to the permanent rose, and you can see that those colours are now going to bleed into one another because both of those colours are wet. If you want to add different colours within your painting but you want to keep those colours separate, this is a really good way to do that. If you just add the colours while they're still wet, most of the time those colours will stay separate as what is happening here. Sometimes you'll get a little blend where they might mix together and make a slightly new colour, but most of the time they'll stay separated like this. Here I'm applying a flat wash of colour onto my paper, and we'll come back to this in a minute. You can make different brush strokes on your page depending on how and where you apply pressure with your brush. So you can use the very tip to get very fine lines like this, or you can use the side of your brush, the belly of the brush, to get thicker lines like what is happening here. I wanted to show you what happens when you apply wet paint onto a slightly damp paint. So I've allowed that colour to dry a little bit, and you can see that because I'm applying the wet paint on top, that's not spreading out as much as what I showed you previously. So that's because that paint has had time to dry slightly. So it all depends on how wet your paper is to how far that paint will spread. You can also blend and mix colours down on the paper. So I've got some permanent rose. Now I'm applying some cerulean blue, and I'm allowing those two colours to touch one another. And you'll see what happens in the middle. When blue and pink or blue and red mix together, they create purple. You can also create splatter effects by loading up your brush with lots of paint and lots of water, and then tapping on the back of the brush. You can also darken up the paint that is down on your paper. So here I've got some magenta. I'm laying down a flat wash, and it's got some water mixed into it. Then I've got a darker version of that magenta, and it's darker because it's got more pigment in it and less water, and I'm just applying that onto the flat wash while it's still wet. You can also change the colour of the paint that's already down on your paper by laying another colour over the top of it. So for instance, I've got yellow laid over pink, and you can see that it's changed that colour in the middle to a slight orange colour. Here I'm applying some wet paint onto dry paper, and this is going to explain to you what a hard edge is. You can see here it's left a harsh, straight and crisp edge, and that is because I've applied wet paint onto dry paper. Now I'm applying wet paint onto dry paper, but I'm taking my damp brush and I'm just touching that to the edge of that paint while it's still wet, and that is going to have that paint bleed out into the wet area of the paper and leave soft and fuzzy edges. Thanks for watching today. I hope you picked up some good tips from this video. Have a lovely rest of your day, happy painting, and I'll see you in my next video.